thank everyone for being here. Again, I am Monique, and we are joined today by Dr. Rod Williams. He is going to talk to us about translating new knowledge for broader PK-12 audiences so that we can reach out to them and involve them when we need to. I'm going to go ahead and let him introduce himself. He has a short presentation, and then we will open for dialogue. And at that point, we will hear a little bit from Dr. Knoblach, and then we'll be done.
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Monique, and thank you, Neil, as well, for the invitation to share some of the pathways that I've taken to share scientific knowledge with PK through 12 audiences in various capacities, both as an extension wildlife specialist and in the College of Agriculture, but in a new role that I have as an assistant provost for engagement, where a lot of the role that I have now is to help faculty across the entire university do that very thing, but much broader than the College of Ag discipline expertise that we have here. So there's going to be a bits and pieces of what I do in the College of Ag, but also some information from my new role as assistant provost of, again, helping faculty and staff with pathways to do the very things that we're talking about in this series. So I'm going to start off by sharing my screen. If I can get it to share. Just a second. It's not wanting to cooperate. Screen 2. If I can. Do you see it, Monique?
Perfect. Yes, we do.
Wonderful. So again, thanks for everyone for participating. And Neil and Monique, now that I'm sharing my screen, I won't be able to really see if someone has a question. But in the Office of Engagement, I want it to be an engaging conversation. So if at any time those of us are able to join virtually live, if they have a question or they put something in the chat, feel free to stop me in the moment and I'll address that particular question or concern right then and there. But no need to wait until the very end of the presentation. So one of the things that I like to think of when we're thinking about broader impacts is, what do we mean by impact? And this is what I mean when I think about impact. And in my new role as Assistant Provost for Engagement, this is what we're sort of envisioning with respect to impact, is breaking impact down into its component parts. You have scholarly impact, which is the potential of a project to advance knowledge and understanding within your own field or across different fields. So you can think about it as being within the academy. When you think about societal impact or broader impacts, there's lots of different ways, but at Purdue, we're trying to really focus on societal impact, which is where we're taking that scholarly impact and trying to change or benefit beyond the academy, whether this be within the economy, society, culture, services, health, and in my case, the environment. And I also like to talk about my approach. So when I started at Purdue in 2008, I had a three-way academic split where I had teaching responsibilities, extension responsibilities, as well as research responsibilities. I still maintain a three-way split. I just also now have an administrative appointment as well. And so everything that I do, I try to think about how can I integrate my teaching, discovery, and engagement mission areas. So that's my general approach. My secondary approach in everything that I do, engagement underscores everything that I do. So given that engagement is the primary focus of my activities, I really look at this model and I'm trying to figure out what's the issue that I'm trying to work with external stakeholders or partners or the community or my PK through 12 audience. What's the issue at hand? How can I engage with those partners early on and throughout my process? And that may be, they're also involved in creating the scholarly outputs, and then how those outputs are disseminated and how I can then track the impact of those scholarly outputs on the issue that I'm trying to define and address in the first place. So that's my second approach. So what I wanted to do is just share a couple quick examples of how I've done that, both starting with teaching and then moving into engagement and ending with discovery. And then I'll show you another example how I've started with discovery, go to engagement and end with teaching, to show you that there's lots of different pathways so that you can be able to really address these PK through 12 initiatives, depending on what your major emphasis of your program could be. So for me, my overarching question was, how can I engage youth with nature? So I'm an extension wildlife specialist. So I'm in the Forestry and Natural Resources Department. Nature is a very big part of what we do. So how could I engage nature with our youth through a STEM curriculum? And I also know that there's a large proportion of our undergraduates that are really interested in getting environmental education jobs. And much as we were talking earlier, Monique, they're like, how can we learn how to communicate, in this case, science and nature and natural resources with a non-academic audience? How can we do this science communication? So when I started this way back when, there weren't any classes, at least in F&R, that helped him to develop those skills, particularly with an eye toward communication. And simultaneously, I was getting asked as a new faculty member to do a lot of STEM programming in schools. And I learned very quickly that I wasn't able to go to the schools as much as the schools wanted me there because I had other responsibilities on campus. But what I was hearing from teachers is they really wanted some curriculum focused on nature that were STEM-based and standards-based. They wanted to have free access to it, and they wanted also some professional development to coincide with that new curriculum that helps them implement it and integrate it into their curriculum. So what I did is I drafted a program called The Nature of Teaching. We know that there's a big disconnect between youth today and their interaction with nature. In fact, we know youth today spend on average 7 hours on some type of electronic device, which means they're spending less time in nature. And this phrase nature deficit disorder was coined by Richard Louv in his book, Last Child in the Woods, back in 2007. Again, we know that there's lots of benefits in connecting with nature. It affects youth, multiple developmental domains, from intellectual, emotional, social, spiritual, and physical. But I really just want to focus on this intellectual domain. We know from scores of research that youth that are engaged in natural play as part of a formal curriculum have enhanced problem solving, creativity, cognitive ability. All of these collectively are thought to increase their academic performance, which is certainly something we want to do in the PK-12 space. So what I did is I created the Nature of Teaching curriculum with a couple of colleagues, as well as some extension educators throughout the state that are both formal and informal. The formal education is standards-based, it's classroom ready, and it focuses on getting grades K through 12, with a particular emphasis on grades K through, because that's for reasons we'll talk about in a little bit, or people might have questions. And then we have an informal curriculum that's more family-friendly, field day ready, and really focuses on those younger age classes. So I want to start with my research, since this is under the Discovery umbrella. And I work with Eastern hellbenders. That's one of the big focal areas of my research. And so I tend to think about having an engaged approach to an endangered species conservation. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail of what my research is, but more importantly, how I use the research findings to engage PK through 12. So the very first thing I did is I created a service learning model that I call a 3D model of teaching and extension, where I help students develop the skills on how to do extension programming. We then design a program, in this case around my research program, and then I work with the students to deliver those programs. So develop the skills, design the program, and then deliver the program. And as part of this course, we talk a lot about theory, we talk about tools like logic models to help develop programs, spend a lot of time talking about the audience and how you need to change your messaging, particularly technical jargon, to make it relevant and understandable to an audience outside of the academy. Again, work with the students to develop various programs, and then we practice to enhance those communication skills when they go to a non-academic audience. So I developed a service learning course where the students worked really closely with me to develop a lot of different types of scholarship, because I'm a big proponent of a diversified portfolio when it comes to scholarship. I'm not a firm believer that any one piece of scholarship is transformational. I oftentimes think a collection of diverse types of scholarship oftentimes collectively can have the most impact. So we have some curriculum that we developed for general audiences. We also created a bunch of videos, because now we know that YouTube is king, and a lot of people go to YouTube to learn some information and use technology in the classroom. So lots of different videos that my team and I have created for various stakeholder groups that have very different messages, all centered around, in my case, the Eastern hellbender, the species that I work with. And then we spent some time focusing on formal curriculum. And these are peer-reviewed extension publications that involved my external partners, the teachers, in various ways. And I'll circle back around to that and talk about how they were engaged. So created lots of different publications, again, using the species that I work with fundamentally as the core content that we're addressing various STEM standards. I also try to figure out what some other interesting ways students might want to learn in the classroom. So I worked with Purdue Exhibits on creating this really excellent exhibit that has lots of information. It has some electronics to get students engaged as well. We created some apps that were also tied to the curriculum. So the students would go through and learn various concepts about the species question, and then they could go as a reward and play some online programming that reinforces the content in those lessons as well. So again, a very diverse approach on how to create this curriculum. And then created some content for zoos, because we know youth frequently visit zoos as a way to get information. So we worked with our zoo partners to develop these zoo trading cards based on the concept of these Pokemon trading cards. Well, we focused ours on Eastern Hellbenders, so the students could go to various zoos and collect various Hellbender cards to share with their family and friends. Those have been wildly popular. Then, of course, we have social media, which oftentimes serves as a medium to direct teachers or anyone who's interested in learning more about this content to our more standard repositories of our content. So collectively with that service learning course, my students have created 17 peer-reviewed extension publications, again, focused on the various types of research that we're doing with amphibians and reptiles. And we use those reviewed research publications, this curriculum, as the core foundation for developing professional development workshops. Teachers said that they wanted, but also direct presentations for the Purdue students to gain that science communication content and experience that they were wanting before they graduated from Purdue. So collectively, the students have given over 80 presentations, 10 professional development workshops, and produced some scholarship in terms of 17 peer-reviewed publications. But then I also wanted to know, well, how's the impact of this service learning class on our students? So I partnered with some social scientists, Dr. Linda Prokope, who's now in HLA, as well as Aaron Thompson, a faculty member in HLA, and Laura Bowling in agronomy. We did a paper on how measuring the impacts of university students that are engaged with service learning to really, again, try to understand if these courses were meeting the content criteria that we set out to do. But then I also wanted to know the content that the students were creating for the general public and for schools and teachers, was it having an impact? So we measured our stakeholders and our partners external to the academy as well. So we're really coming at it from multiple standpoints of how impactful was this service learning extension engagement approach. So that's one method that I'll share with you. And then really quickly, I want to go the opposite direction and start with, perhaps we have people that are watching the video who are online and say, well, what if I just want to start with a research project? And how can I take that research and that new knowledge that we're creating with research and turn that into linkages with PK-12? Well, I'm going to share another project that I've been involved with. This was several years ago, but it's called the Hardwood Ecosystem Experiment. It's a 100-year study that's essentially assessing the impacts of forest management techniques on flora and fauna. And as a herpetologist, I'm interested in a specific suite of species. In this case, we've got 4 different species of woodland salamanders, we've got turtles, we've got snakes. And again, we're trying to measure the impact of things like clear cuts and how those might affect these forest dwelling amphibians and reptiles. So as you'd imagine, brought in a bunch of graduate students to ask those specific research questions, generate a bunch of scholarly publications. I charged all my graduate students with, how can we take that information and translate that to people outside of the academy to make sure that that research is relevant? And we came at this from multiple approaches. One is we created some technical guides for trained foresters who have direct access to people who manage those forests. So we took the graduate student research and made a technical guide for foresters. We also made a whole bunch of YouTube videos that were for a more general audience. We had podcasts. And then again, down in the bottom right, went right back to the teachers and said, I think I've got some really great research questions and information that might serve you well in the classroom. So again, went back to my Nature of Teaching website. All of that research is under this wildlife tab where teachers can access this brand new curriculum that's all focused on that body of research. So we created a bunch of formal classes, Nature of Teaching Mammals, Birds, Forest Ecology. These were 2-day professional development workshops that teachers could attend and learn how to incorporate that curriculum that the students and I have developed in their classroom. Because if you just give it to them, they're not content experts. We did develop our curriculum that provided a lot of background information so that they at least had enough information to teach it. But still, if they don't have that comfort level within this particular topic, they may not want to incorporate it into their classroom. So as an extension specialist, I was also really interested in how effective is my curriculum, my interaction with the students, the professional development workshops, are they having the desired impact addressing the need that the teachers and the students have laid out? So we can track things like publications, and I know how many times my publications have been downloaded from the education store. But we can also start looking at impact in terms of knowledge gain. So I do pre-post assessments on all of our professional development workshops. All of my curriculum have pre-post assessments for the students as well. So I can not only measure how much the teachers are learning from that professional development experience, but also understand how many of them are actually implementing the curriculum 5, 6, 7 months after the workshop, and then use the pre-post evaluations on the students to see how much the K-12 students are learning on that new curriculum as well. So lots of different levels of ways to measure the impact of the program to see if I'm actually moving the needle on the need that I outlined early on. So again, always thinking about the need, the issue, how my partners can be involved, a diversified portfolio of scholarship, and how am I going to determine whether or not I'm having any impact. And I wanted to share a little bit, because oftentimes this is what faculty struggle with, is how do I frame this in terms of promotion and tenure? And I do a lot of work in that space in my new role as assistant provost for engagement. So it's really important that you very clearly articulate what that issue is in your reporting. And it's really also important to tell how you're engaging with your partners. This reciprocal relationship is absolutely fundamental. So for me, and I'm going to use the teachers as an example, I often, every 2 years, I hold focus groups with teachers and ask them, what kind of curricular needs do you need or do you have within this natural resource nature space? Because I can tell you, if I haven't changed or morphed since 2009 when this started, I can assure you, and I know Neil and Monique, you probably can verify this, curricular needs from 2009 are different in 2022. And so if you don't go back and check with your partners about how those needs have changed, you're going to be creating scholarly activities that no one's going to use, and it's just going to be a waste of time. I also work with teachers. Sometimes they have a real interest in co-authoring some of the lesson plans that we develop. All the teachers are willing to let me come to the classroom and pilot test the curriculum, give me immediate feedback so that I can go back to the classroom at Purdue and revise, because those of us who've developed curriculum, oftentimes you can develop curriculum in your mind and it works flawlessly. You take it to the classroom and try it, and it may or may not work quite like it does in your head, right? So it requires a little bit of modification. That happens more often than we'd like to admit. But I also reach out to the teachers, and they serve as peer reviewers. I always have 1 or 2 licensed teachers review all of the curriculum to make sure, again, it's meeting those STEM standards that we say it is, and addressing the needs that the teachers are outlining. And collectively, by having focus groups, co-authoring, pilot testing, peer review, we have a high implementation rate of teachers at our professional development workshops. Right at 80% of the teachers are incorporating this into the curriculum. To me, that's one of the most impactful things that I can track as an engaged scholar. And then when you're thinking about promotion and tenure, did my PowerPoint just disappear? That's interesting.
Yes, it did. We've had a host of technical issues today, so don't worry.
Huh. Let me see if I can, I don't know what happened. Let me stop sharing. I don't know what happened to it. Let me see if I can open it back up.
Well, while you work on that, that gives me an opportune time. One of the things to talk about studying science communication, I've read that it is more than just translating the information for the audience, and that's a lot of what I'm pulling out of this presentation here recently, is that it's a group effort, and coming together to use these different partners is how you make this translation process more successful.
Absolutely. And I don't know where my PowerPoint went. It's completely gone. Huh. Well, that's interesting. Let me see if I can pull it up this way.
Rod, do you have multi screens? It could have went into a different screen.
Oh, it closed PowerPoint out altogether.
Oh, wow.
PowerPoint
Okay.
crashed, maybe.
Yeah, it completely crashed, but I got it back up. I found it. So if I can, let me get out of this. I apologize for that. That has actually never happened before. So that's a first time for everything. So let me scroll through and catch back up. I'm just wanted to finish up with a couple of things. I think this is where we were, correct?
Yes. Yes.
There, can you see it okay, Monique?
Yep, we're good. We're back.
So again, oftentimes when you're thinking about how to frame this, you can just list the different types of scholarly outputs, and all this is, and this is not up to date. I just wanted to show that oftentimes from a diversified standpoint, it's good to list your publications, any websites that the publications live on, any exhibits, the workshops and program. And again, collectively, those all tend to approach that need in different and various and impactful ways. And so when you're thinking about impact story, I like to say, tell the story of the 3 W's. What was the need? What did you do? And what was the result? That's what we need to be thinking about when we're trying to share our story about the impact of our programs. And so for the program that I just talked about, right, we have our students. We know how many students, what percentage of the students in the class are co-authored on publications, some indication of how that curriculum is being used. I know for our example, our curriculum has been downloaded 350,000 times, which I'm very proud of the fact that these students are creating these publications that are being well sought after by our teachers, which I think is just such an impactful thing for the students and the teachers. And I also think it's important to talk about those professional development workshops, to talk about how many teachers you do programs for, how many schools they represent, what kind of knowledge are the teachers getting, and then what kind of impact is it having on the students that they're teaching as well. So again, coming at that from multiple levels to talk about that various impact. And I want to end talking about broadening broader impacts, because those were all things that I was purposeful about and I really wanted to make sure was in place. But then there were things that just happened organically and I think have really helped take my messaging to the next level. But again, it wasn't something that I was planning on in 2009. They just sort of emerged over time. And one is I did make a strategic point to partner with extension educators because we have extension educators in all 92 counties. They can be in places that I'm not, and they can be delivering messages as well. So one of the things I did is work with a series of extension educators, both health and human science, A&R, as well as 4-H, to create a signature program. And it's the Nature of Teaching signature program. And these are opportunities for at least for A&R educators to get signature program credit by giving at least 6 hours of instructional programming in schools using the curriculum that I just shared with you. So they have these 6 programs, and then they also evaluate those. But again, in order to facilitate the delivery of that program for extension educators, I worked with a series of educators to create this educator guide, which outlines exactly what they need to do in order to deliver these programs across the state year in and year out. So that's been really, really successful. And I'm really proud of the fact that since educators have gotten on board, we have a much broader reach in counties across the state. It's been over 48 counties, and I haven't yet tallied and incorporated the 2021 data yet. So this is 3 or 4 months out of date, and I just didn't have time to update that yet. Over 35 school districts, again, almost 80% implementation. That data is a little bit outreach, and 4,000 youth, just because of the incorporation of these extension educators delivering programs annually throughout the state. So we have a chance to really build this foundational knowledge with teachers. They implement it into the classroom, and ultimately we're providing this nature-based education to my ultimate group, which are the students in K-12. And then lastly, what's emerged is I've been approached by Indiana State Parks. They said, we really want a local conservation message to give the patrons that visit our state parks throughout the state. Do you have anything? And I said, it just so happens I have something on hellbenders, and we have curriculum that I think can be used as an informal setting. So we're really excited to be partnering with Indiana State Parks. So we've got the 14 southern parks, which is where hellbenders historically tended to occur, are delivering some hellbender messaging using the nature teaching curriculum as well. So right now, 10 of those 14 properties have been actively incorporating this into their surveys. So we did a big presentation for their natural interpreters, their state interpreters, to train them on how to do that. We got a grant and provided them all with educational totes that has everything in it that they need. And that's been a really great partnership over the last 2 or 3 years. And so I just want to leave the folks with some engagement insights. Think about those reciprocal partnerships. Make sure that those partnerships are integrated well, they're integrated early, and they're integrated often. And be thinking about how you can diversify your scholarship, evaluate the impact of those programs on your stakeholders, in this case, PK through 12 audiences, and make sure you report that so that your partners and everyone understands that your programming is having an impact on its intended audience. And lastly, in my new role, I'll miss if I didn't talk about some resources here in the Office of Engagement. And I know Neil's familiar with this. We published a document called the Guide, Documenting, Evaluating, and Recognizing Engaged Scholarship, that really focuses on how you can incorporate and build impactful engagement programs, regardless of your audience, but certainly PK fits right in there. How you can evaluate documents that are doing that, and then the various awards and resources that are available throughout our office. And lastly, I'll leave you with this. We have a couple of pathways here in the Office of Engagement to help faculty and staff matriculate through the system with an eye toward external partnerships. And it could be in PK through 12 space. We have Service Learning Fellows programs that you can apply for. That's a year-long program. We have Scholarship of Engagement Fellows, a professional development pathway. We have Societal Impact professional development pathways. And then one of the things that I most enjoy about my new role is I get to chair all of the awards and recognition within Purdue University and get to recognize our engaged scholars for doing the very types of work that your office and in your PK through 12 initiative is highlighting, and reward those scholars for the great work that they do out in the communities. So with that, that's really, I wanted to leave time for questions and conversations and anything else that you guys wanted to do, but I just wanted to share a couple of pathways and some examples of what I've done over the years to really reach those youth K through 12.
Good. Your timing was perfect. That was awesome. I have some questions. Dr. Knoblach, did you want to start? Did you have anything specific in mind after hearing our presentation that you'd like to start with before I jump into mine?
You can go ahead, Monique. I do have some questions, but why don't you start?
Okay, so we talked about some specific resources here at Purdue, and I was wondering if you could tell us where you think someone who's trying to translate their work for the PK-12 audiences, where is the best place to start if they're a little tentative about where to begin?
Well, I think there's a couple of entry points, and obviously it depends. Are you talking specifically within the College of Ag or just anyone within Purdue?
College of Ag, yes.
So in the College of Ag, I think this venue is obviously the place to start, because I think Neil's done a good job of creating a community in the College of Ag where people can go and learn from other scholars. I know he's offered various types of venues over the years where like-minded individuals can get together and share stories and have conversations. They can certainly reach out to the Office of Engagement, because ultimately the Office of Engagement right now is trying to coordinate PK through 12 efforts at the university level. And so what that does is provide a much larger venue for people to start talking. And maybe they want to engage with someone from the College of Education who has unlimited access to schools throughout the state. We have an engagement faculty fellow right now, Dr. Lynn Bryan, who's leading a lot of the program Catalyst, who is very actively engaged at schools all over the state of Indiana. So she's very well connected. And if they want, it depends on what they're wanting, right? If they're looking for entry points into schools or just learn how to do that, again, I would reach out to our office for sure, because maybe there's some formal pathways like those fellows programs we were talking about, or maybe they just want to be connected to someone who's doing that and have a coffee luncheon and just say, hey, can you just share with me your approach and what were the hurdles, both perceived or real, that you had to navigate in order to create these partnerships and this type of scholarly endeavor.
Thank you.
Oh, you're muted, Monique.
There we go. Sometimes just starting, I think, can be the most difficult step. And so knowing, once you have these resources, you know what they are, like where should they start? And so with that in mind, here at the College of Ag, I have felt, it could be just because I'm interested in science communication, but I felt there's been an uptick in the interest in science communication in the scientific community. For example, I follow a really good podcast about animals, and I consider that animal science, science communication. I'm hearing about it through the various NPR outlets that are talking about it. So how do you feel about people within the College of Ag, how should they think about these outside resources when they think about where other places that they can go to be inspired by? For example, your Pokemon card idea with the zoo was really great. Did you see that somewhere else as science communication is expanding and becoming more talked about, places that you can go to be inspired for ideas?
So I will agree with you that I think science communication and just the way we as scientists communicate science has broadened and deepened, right? I
Yes.
think there's more and more of us that are interested personally in making sure that our impact is our science, our research, our scholarly endeavors, however you want to define that, are having an impact beyond just publishing the peer-reviewed papers. Right? That's rewarding, right? Neil can verify it's rewarding to get a paper published, right? But it's equally rewarding to me, perhaps more rewarding, when I know that the work that I'm doing is changing and impacting someone's life outside of the academy. And so as we provide opportunities for faculty and staff and graduate students to know that that's an option, a scholarly option, and that there are pathways to be rewarded for those type of activities at an institution of higher education like Purdue, that was a big hurdle. Faculty want to make sure that this is not additive and be integrative with the work that they're already doing. And that's what I was trying to highlight in the presentation that I gave. Is it's absolutely not additive, right? If it's additive, it's going to be, because most of us are very busy, and doing something that's disparate than the main focus that they're doing is probably not likely to be sustainable. But if you can integrate it early across whatever mission area you're most interested in, whatever you're charged with, whatever you're most passionate about, and you're thoughtful and purposeful, it can be incredibly rewarding. So I think that's part of it, and Purdue is really gaining traction and rewarding faculty for doing that. And I'll just share some data with you. From 2010 to 2014, we had 17 faculty members get promoted on the basis on either fully or partially on the scholarship of engagement. From 2015 to 2022, it's 113.
Wow.
So we went from 17 to 113. And that's because the promotion and tenure guidelines are more clear, and faculty are saying, wow, I can do this, and my scholarly impact is equal to my societal impact. As long as I'm demonstrating it and it's scholarly, we can be rewarded, and not only for promotion and tenure, but receiving awards, both through the PK-12. I mean, Neil's done a great job of highlighting faculty and staff in the College of Ag, highlighting the great work that our engaged scholars are doing in that space, and we're doing it at the university level too. Those are important things. Those are important hurdles that we have overcome, and that's why I think we're seeing so much more interest in people doing this here, not only just at Purdue, but within the academy more broadly.
Yeah, so that actually, the concept of making your work integrative instead of additive, so it doesn't feel like a chore, it feels like a tip. And so that follows my next question. Maybe that is your tip. I was hoping you could share one or two ideas or tips with us that you've learned through your years working through this, from your successes or your failures, to make these kinds of translation concepts happen in all of their various ways.
Well, one of the tips that I would share with you that I learned through almost utter failure was building these reciprocal partnerships, because the way I approach teachers when I was a brand new, freshly minted faculty member is I created a body of scholarly publications, my lesson plans, my curriculum. So I went to the teachers, I held my first focus group, and I had a series of curriculum already developed that I was very proud of, that I thought I knew that that's what they wanted. And so it was all very science-based, because that's what I am, I'm a scientist. And the teachers immediately said, Rod, this curriculum is great. The way it's laid out, the way you've got it partitioned, perfect. We understand it, we like it, this is what we're used to seeing. The problem is it only talks about science. And at that time, science wasn't part of ISTEP. And they said, we need you to incorporate mathematics, social studies, reading, writing, if you can give me these other subject areas, we have 90-minute reading blocks, we have 90-minute writing blocks. If you incorporate the science in your curriculum to those, we can now incorporate it into our curriculum. Otherwise, it's additive and it may not make the cut. So you'll see my first two publications didn't have that. All my curriculum since that time have had that. So that my tip is talk to your stakeholders, make sure you fully understand the need, and make sure that you initiate that reciprocal relationship really, really early on. And the last tip that I had is be mindful, right? When we're thinking about our discovery space, none of us would go into a research project and submit a grant to a sponsor without thinking about what type of data are we going to collect, what kind of analysis are we going to do, and what are our outlets, and how are we going to measure whether our science is successful or not. The same can be said for the engaged work that we do. Think about who your audience is going to be. Think how they're going to implement your project. How are you going to measure success of that societal impact? The process is exactly the same as you would do for the specific discovery approach. Make sure that you're doing that very early on and throughout the process when you're thinking about your societal impact as well. Far too often, I hear faculty come to me and say, man, I wish I'd have been thinking about this 5 years ago or 6 years ago, or even 3 years ago, because now I've already got these programs established, but I didn't think about how to evaluate or how to incorporate my partners. So that's the second tip that I hear most of the time those are the two probably big ones that I would share with anybody watching the video.
Thank you. So my final question then, I'll build on that just a little bit. Right now, there is anecdotal data. I don't know how much actual data exists from communication research, but the public is increasingly, they're having an increasingly difficult time dealing with ambiguity in messaging. And so how would you encourage people that are trying to translate their research to think about ambiguity? And I bring this up because specifically your Hellbender research translations, there isn't necessarily a space for them to be ambiguous there. And so is the idea to avoid putting stuff out there that is ambiguous, or how do you think about working with the public in the 21st century fractured media environment so that we could have better PK-12 impacts?
I would say for people just getting into that space, if you're unfamiliar or are concerned that that might be an issue, just like the approach that I had when I was trying to investigate the impact of the service learning course on my students, I am not a trained social scientist. So the first thing I did is reach out to trained social scientists and said, can you help me make sure that this is done in a replicable and standardized and publishable way? I would argue that someone getting into this space is going to be dealing a lot with the media. Reach out to someone that has some expertise, right? And we have a department in our College of Ag that can really help in that space and make sure that you can minimize ambiguity and that your messaging is clear and objective and it's hitting its mark, because it takes a lot of time, it takes practice, and it takes some skills to do that. And oftentimes, if we don't have that, partnership is needed in that space too. So
we should try to minimize it to the best of our ability. And then the other thing that I've heard recently is embracing it and just trying to communicate to our audiences when they have questions that it's part of the process. How do you feel about embracing ambiguity in our work?
I'm a firm believer if we have to stick to what the data says, and if the data if the data that we currently have at hand can't answer the question that's being asked of us, we have to admit that and say that's why we still do more science. That's why there's more science still to do. I don't know, because the data doesn't bear out the answer to your question is what we should do as scientists. Does that answer your question?
Yes, that's perfect. All right, Dr. Knoblach, that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Monique. Excellent. Does anybody from our audience have any questions? Feel free to unmute.
Okay, thank you. I have 2 questions. Well, thank you, Dr. William, for your presentation. I really enjoy. I was thinking about my own research. So, I always find this very interesting, right? When I can connect with my own research. And thank you, Monique, for the wonderful questions. I don't think my questions are so good, but, they are my question nevertheless. But, I really like the system approach that you have to your research. I think that is very interesting. And I was thinking about the formal and the informal curriculum, right? And that was my curiosity. Do you use the same kind of curriculum in the classroom and with families and other audiences that are not well educated in the topic, or they are not, think about maybe parents of, just that they don't have an education, right? And they don't know the topic. So how do you relate to them in creating this curriculum informally so they can benefit from the content?
So the short answer is no. The two curricula are very different in their structure. So if you think about our formal curriculum, that's really for the classroom setting that's much more structured. So the curriculum follows a particular format, which is it typically has a little bit more background information, a little more content, conceptual information that's presented in a classroom setting, followed by a series of activities, right? Because especially experiential outdoor activities, because mine's focused on nature play. Whereas the informal curriculum, instead of having maybe 10 or 15 minutes of content or teaching, it may have 5 or 6 minutes of teaching, followed predominantly by activities that are hands-on, family-based. So they're very differently, they're structured very differently given the environment that we're trying to instruct that particular audience.
Okay, good.
Is that helpful?
Yes, that was very helpful. Thank you. Then I have another question. So how do you scale this curriculum so, you know, the others can benefit, like not only in Indiana, but maybe in other states, maybe in other countries? Like, how do you
Great
make
question.
sure that, yeah.
So I didn't talk about that. So when I started the nature teaching, I had a very strong focus on Indiana. And so all my standards were Indiana state standards. And as the nature teaching program matured, and as I started developing the program, we started to go to other states. So I've went as far northeast as Maine, and I've done lots of programming up in Maine for teachers up there, up in Minnesota, Kentucky, the surrounding states in Indiana. And the very first question they thought is, well, how does this Indiana standard mesh with this Maine standard? Or what I've really heard more commonly was, we don't really have state standards. We don't follow the state standards. We're following the core curriculum now. And so I've backed off of the Indiana state standards, and it was not fun, but we went through and changed all of our standards and our curriculum to core standards and next generation science standards. And to your point, that's because I continued to have those focus groups with teachers. And even Indiana teachers were saying, we prefer you just to have core standards. We can match them up to Indiana state standards if we have to, but core standards and next generation science standards, that's what we want. So I made the change. And that way, the nature of teaching can be used by anyone across the country for the most part.
That is very
good question. But yeah, that was something that I had to adapt and change as my stakeholder group and my stakeholder needs evolved. I should put that in the presentation. That's an excellent question.
Yeah, Dr. Bella Bravo, those were really good. So useful.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Excellent questions. Anybody else from the audience have any questions? Okay, feel free to chime in if you do. Rod, thank you so much for this excellent presentation and really just sharing a lot of your experiences and what you've learned along the way. Mine are a little bit more meta, self-reflective from your perspective. First question, Rod, of all the things that you could have engaged yourself in with extension appointment, why would a faculty member like yourself choose to go into the PK-12 space?
That's a good question, Neil. And I think part of it was because what I was trying to do is mesh what I like to do personally with what I could do professionally. And I'm married to a school teacher. And so I work a lot. And before my faculty position, I would still go into schools and talk about science and talk about nature with youth. And then I had children of my own. And that was something that I enjoyed spending a lot of time with them, was getting them excited and engaged with nature and youth. So what I was really trying to do was what Monique and I were talking about earlier, is how can I mesh my personal interests with what I do professionally? And that's really why I landed on PK-12. And then I started being a little more formal and asking teachers, and they said, yeah, there's a real need for this. And I thought, wow, these are two things that I can marry, that I can do, with my teaching mission, I can do with engagement, I can do with research, and it just seemed to fit really nicely.
Yeah, that's great. Have you seen any benefits for your program in getting involved in the PK-12 space? So has it resulted in students inquiring about your major or the undergraduate courses, or how to get more involved, or even grad students? I mean, by being involved with the PK-12 space, have you seen any other benefits?
So I think from the undergrad perspective, what that has done, it culminated into the development of a brand new student club. And so I had students in the class that were going, getting to visit these classrooms 8 or 9 times in a semester. And as soon as the semester was over, they came right back to my door and said, "Dr. Williams, what now? What do we do now? How do we get back into the classrooms?" And I said, "Well, if we're interested, we can create a student club." And that club is now called the Student Chapter of Environmental Education. And it still exists today. And I, along with Kara Salazar, were the faculty and staff advisors for that for many, many years, until I achieved an administrative role. And now Megan Gunn, who I think was one of your former presenters, is now the staff advisor for the Student Chapter of Environmental Education. So it generated enough interest that now it's self-sustainable. So now the students have specific community partners that they are able to continually engage with as part of their academic experience, and at least while they're here at Purdue. So that's been very rewarding to see that that's been developed and sustained for probably close to 6 or 8 years by now.
And so it really provided leadership opportunities or student development opportunities for your undergrad as well as graduate students. So yeah, it kind of makes it a more holistic developmental experience for them. That's great. Now, my last question, at least my planned last question, Rod, unless I come up with another one here, is you personally, professionally, and I'm really thinking about Rod as a scientist, as a wildlife specialist, expert, well-known. As you said, you're very much driven by, I want to know what the evidence says. So speak into those who are in the natural science space, the biological science space, those who may not have, as you said, the social science background. How did how did getting involved in PK-12 have an impact on you as a scientist or a professional?
Oh, lots of ways. And I would say, arguably, my involvement in that space is what led me to be in this office right now. Is I really learned how to have that reciprocal relationship with partners. Working with educators, as you probably know, are about the most passionate stakeholder group that you can work with. They feel very strongly about their students learning, and they're just great role models. And so for me, it's just been incredibly rewarding to get to work with such passionate partners that not only give to their students, but they give back to me and our students for the ultimate benefit of youth in general. And so they're just as passionate that the undergraduates at Purdue are coming there and learning from the teachers and their students from the content that the Purdue Service Learning class is providing, as much as their students are learning from our Purdue students. So for me, I just look at it as everybody wins. I get to see the benefit for our partners, for the youth in the schools. I get to see it from the benefit of our students at Purdue. I get benefit personally by coordinating these events as a scholar. So I just really look at it as a win-win-win, and just, it's very rewarding for me, both professionally and personally. And it's provided some really great partnerships and collaborations with people across different disciplines. So one of the things I really didn't talk about in this presentation is this nature of teaching model has been really beneficial for other scholars too, that don't have those expertise. And they're like, "Rod, if we do a grant proposal on modeling, can we create some curriculum on population modeling? And then you help my students develop this curriculum. Can we collaborate together on this NSF grant and then go do some professional development workshops?" So I've had an opportunity to do disease ecology with Dr. Jason Hooverman. I've worked with a couple of other scholars in our department, one on genetics, one on population modeling. Some have been successful, some have not in terms of funding, but it's been a great way for me to broaden the curriculum because those faculty members and their students serve as a content specialist. I package it and help develop the content and that I can share with my stakeholder base. So it's been very rewarding from that standpoint too, Neil.
Yeah, oh, that's excellent. What I heard is that it really helps you move into the space of working in an interdisciplinary way, and also in a cross-mission way, right? Connecting the different missions and collaborating with colleagues. It's fantastic. So thank you, Rod. I see Gwen has, Pearson has made a couple comments. Do you want to say any more, Gwen? Your comments in chat about publishing the B lesson plan with NOT?
Well, eventually publishing it. My goodness. Yeah. A lot of things keep happening, but it is for sure going to get done, but not until after Bug Bowl. Nothing is getting done until after Bug Bowl.
Yeah. So Gwen, let's go ahead and do the shout out for some upcoming PK-12 events. So tell us about Bug Bowl.
Yeah.
Sure. April 9th, we're going to be in person, and we'll see how it goes. We are not going to do cricket spitting this year. We're doing cricket flinging. So you get a spoon and you're going to throw the cricket with the spoon. And we haven't specified how people are going to do that. So I expect it'll be quite entertaining. But the spitting part seemed like a terrible idea this year. But the rest of it, yeah, we'll be back doing the petting zoo and all sorts of other things. The art show will go up next week. So if you're in Smith Hall next Tuesday through the 11th, you can see the artwork from, we've got kids all over Indiana that have sent their work in. It's K-12. And that's about it for now.
Yeah.
Oh, we also have the High School Recruiting Day, Discover Insect Biology is the week, the 22nd of April.
Fantastic. So next week is really going to be an awesome week in the College of Agriculture. Gwen has just done a shout out for Bug Bowl, but that's part of Spring Fest. So from 10 o'clock on Saturday, April 9th, from 10 a.m. until 6 p.m., please come to Purdue campus with, well, your children or your friends, be a part of that. Also next week is Ag Week. And so as a part of Ag Week, we're going to be having some virtual after school lessons for K through 12 students. And so starting Monday after late afternoon through Thursday, late afternoon and evening, we are going to have some virtual STEM lessons taught by our students in the Teaching STEM through Ag and Natural Resources class. So be on the lookout for that announcement. Registration will open up this week. Also on Thursday, April 7th at 3:30, we're going to meet and celebrate our PK-12 award recipients for 2022. So please join us in Findler in the Dean's Auditorium, Findler 241 at 3:30. We'll have some speed talks. We'll make the announcement of who our recipients are, and then we'll have back to actually some refreshments and face-to-face interaction. It's been a couple years, so help us celebrate PK-12 success in the College of Agriculture on April 7th at 3:30. At this point, would like to direct you to the link that Monique posted. Please provide us any feedback, and we can share that with the presenter as well as plan for next year's presentations. I just want to thank you, Dr. Williams, for joining us today. Excellent presentation, well conceived, and giving a framework as well as some examples of how you did this, and also just sharing your passion and how that has really integrated into all the work that you do. So thank you, Monique, for facilitating and hosting, also for Sarah in the background helping keep us organized on social media. Thank you all, and have a wonderful day.